I think that's my cue. Welcome, everyone. Uh, Thanks for joining the DLCD Housing Division's Open Forum. This is a meeting we hold on the first Monday of every even-numbered month in conjunction, kind of offsetting with the Housing Accountability and Productions Office's similar type open forum, which is the first Monday of every odd-numbered month. So today, the purpose of these meetings is to discuss the latest and greatest and some updates on things related to housing planning, particularly as it relates to the DLCD Housing Division's scope of work. And it's an opportunity usually we have some kind of presentation at the beginning, but then really is a good opportunity for you all to ask any questions that you would like or engage in kind of cross attendee conversations on topics that are relevant and that kind of thing. We've got 90 minutes to be with you all today. Feel free to come and go as you please. Also, does not mean that we need to hold the whole 90 minutes if there's no follow-up questions or just further discussion, but we won't shut it down early the best we can. We've got a couple of things on the agenda today to kind of go over in terms of presentation. Those include an update on what's called the More Homes Rulemaking, which stands for Middle Housing Oregon Homes Rulemaking, to implement two bills coming out of the 25 legislative session. I'll take a little bit of time to talk about the housing planning assistance grants that some folks in this room are involved in. And we'll talk a little bit about some guidance documents that we're preparing for the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis Program. We've got a couple other miscellaneous items to share with you as well. So that's the agenda for today. Feel free to use the chat. Feel free to raise your hand. Feel free to jump in with questions. Does not need to be formal by any stretch of the imagination, and can be free flowing, and the conversation can lead where it goes. So without further ado, I think I'll get started with the first portion of the agenda. I'll introduce myself, and if folks come off mute or want to say hi or ask a question or something like that, just introduce yourself as you're doing so. I appreciate it. So my name is Ethan Stuckmeyer, manage the housing division here at the Department of Land Conservation Development. And I'm going to jump into a little bit of an overview on the More Homes rulemaking. So like I mentioned, MORE is an acronym. It's MHOR Homes, stands for Middle Housing and Oregon Homes. It implements, or the intention is to draft rules to implement two pieces of legislation that were passed in the 25 legislative session. The first is House Bill 2138. This is a bill that was championed by the governor and passed describes, it's kind of a policy, an omnibus policy bill. There are several things therein. We'll get into the details necessarily of what's all included in that bill, but there's a section 22, that outlines 6 or 7 rulemaking tasks for DLCD over the course of the 25-27 biennium. That ranges from developing administrative rules related to reasonable siting and design standards for middle housing, accessory dwelling units, single room occupancies, and prefabricated and manufactured dwellings. It also directs the department to draft a statewide model system development charge methodology. And there are some rolling effective dates that happen or that are articulated as part of 2138. The one to kind of keep in mind for the purposes of this rulemaking is that rulemaking related to those 7 provisions in section 22 are directed to be completed no later than January 1st of 2028. On the other bill, that is House Bill 2258, and this is generally known as the Oregon Homes Bill or the Oregon Homes Program. That program is kind of a blending of 2 different pre-approvals that can happen at the state level. The first is pre-approved building plans, so the actual structure of the building. directs the Department of Consumer and Business Services through the Building Codes Division to develop and approve and review and approve pre or building plans that can achieve this kind of pre-approval through their what's called their master planning program. So these are structures like that include all sorts of different housing types, single family or single unit detached, all the way through some multi-unit developments, including middle housing. Certain provisions must be met in terms of the actual lot that can be eligible to develop a pre-approved Oregon home upon. And that's the role of the Department of Land Conservation and Development in this rulemaking, is to identify which lots, which parameters on lots, or which lots are eligible for use of or development of an Oregon home's pre-approved plan through this kind of expedited limited review process that happens at the local level. So DLC's role is to think through which sites might be eligible for development of a pre-approved Oregon home. And that's the purpose of that DLCD's portion of that rulemaking. The deadlines for rule adoption on Oregon Homes program is January 1st of 2027. However, we are planning to adopt those rules to implement that program at the Land Conservation and Development Commission's August 2026 meeting. So that means that we're moving full steam ahead on getting that program up and running, which means that the rulemaking advisory committee process is beginning pretty soon here. The first meeting of that rulemaking advisory committee is February 18th, in just a few short weeks from now. And that rulemaking will unfold in kind of two phases. The first phase is strictly focused on Oregon homes. And then also there's a kind of little tangent that first phase will include, which is the rework of the definition of cottage cluster that happened as a result of HB 2138. That definition changed to not put a square foot limit on the size of a cottage cluster, and instead uses terminology like small footprint. And so I wanted to get that completed soon, so that when local governments are updating their codes by the established deadline in the bill, that they have some time to do that. So Oregon homes and that small definitional change to cottage clusters is included in the phase 1 adoption, scheduled to be completed again by August 2026. Phase 2 of that is focused on all of the other 2138 rulemaking processes related to middle housing, ADUs, SROs, prefabricated structures, and the model system development charge methodology. Let's see, some of the things that are related to this rulemaking that are of note is kind of the structure of the means by which the rulemaking advisory committee and DLCD interact. The recent rulemakings related to housing in the department have included really long rulemaking advisory committees with a presentation in the first half or so of those meetings, and then discussion after the presentation. We're going to try to structure it a little bit more, a little bit differently this go around to free up more time for discussion, and also to help folks who are not part of the advisory committee follow along with that process. And that includes the department pre-recording all of the presentation material that would be heading to the advisory committee. Oftentimes that would take place again in that first chunk of the advisory committee process, but instead that'll be like a pre-recorded version of that, can be viewed in advance, reviewed multiple times over and over again, sent along to others to review, and will be posted on the DLCD website. So the hope with that is that folks who are not participating in the actual discussion can still follow along in the subject or the content of the rulemaking advisory committee meetings. And at the end, you can kind of package that all up and provide it as kind of like a modular viewing experience for folks to kind of follow along with. Okay, at the first meeting, they talked about this concept. In the second one, they talked about a different concept, and together it's the entirety of the program. So we'll see how that goes. It's a little bit of a new trial effort, and would love anybody's feedback on that if you are able to follow along or find that useful or don't. So there, I'm going to pause and see if there's any questions about any of that I outlined. I'll ask folks on the housing division to maybe put some links in the chat to the rulemaking page that includes the More Homes rulemaking, just for folks to have a link to click on and take home with them if anybody's able to do that. Much appreciated. But yeah, any questions, comments, concerns on the policy or the rulemaking, happy to engage on all of that. Thank you, Ingrid, for the link. All right, we're going to get comfortable there in the silence because I'm going to let that linger for a second. Okay. Yes. Good. Yes. Okay. So I'm assuming this is in reference to 2138 implementation. Some of the things in that bill go into effect. So I'm going to take a step back and start anew on some of the timelines in House Bill 2138. So the deadline for adoption of administrative rules is January 1st, 2028. That is also the same deadline or implementation deadline for some of the policies therein, which is difficult, obviously, to navigate and put cities in quite a bind. There are other provisions that the commission will adopt rules on by, again, January 1st, 2028, that the bill actually delegates authority to the commission to determine the effective date of. And so in those instances where there are provisions that aren't going to be done in advance, that the commission can set a date further in the future for implementation. So I just want to call that out. The one timeline issue that is present, though, is January 1st, 2028 is also the implementation deadline for local governments in implementing the new definition of cottage cluster. Again, that kind of small footprint terminology is used in the definition for cottage cluster. And so to prevent that kind of bunching up of when we adopt the actual rules, defining that term and giving some more directional guidance to those terms, then instead we'll actually adopt that well in advance of the January 1st, 2028 deadline. And those cottage cluster design standard or just cottage cluster definition rules will be adopted in August of 2026. So hopefully that resolves some of that. I know that there are yet other provisions that were effective immediately upon passage, which are creating a little bit of a bind for local governments. But the adoption of the rules will take time and will be completed in bulk for 2138 by the end of 2027, which again will allow the commission to set future deadlines for implementation. Okay. Okay, Lee, I see your point in the chat. So draft materials in terms of the draft rules, is that what you're referring to potentially?
Hi.
Right.
I'm just thinking, I'm thinking back to the ONA rulemaking, and I would be looking for the draft opportunity mapping methodology. And did they talk about that in meeting 4 or in meeting 5? And you have to go into the materials and click through all the links again. So having
Yes.
This might not be as complex as ONA was in terms of the number of pieces, but having just those types of resources and draft materials available on the rulemaking landing page rather than linked only through the agendas would be helpful for people who are following along.
Absolutely, totally. And I think especially in the context of the Oregon Homes rulemaking, that first phase, because the timeline is, I mean, like 6 months, we have those meetings like very structured out. And we know the topic of the meeting in May or April that we're going to have even now. So we will, hopefully that's better and useful so that you can refer to those much easier and be like, okay, I'm just interested on the relationship of Oregon Homes to my local standards, and I can identify that meeting to kind of go dive in more. There was another thing I was going to say there as well, which was, it'll come back to me. Oh, yes, it was this. Okay, so in terms of the scope of and the breadth of the rulemaking, the all in total, all in all, the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis rulemaking, what's called notice of proposed rulemaking, which is like all of the materials, including all of the reports and statements and all of that kind of stuff that state agencies need to provide to the Secretary of State to do a rulemaking effort. That was on the order of like 500 pages. That was all the track changes. It was all the model codes. It was all the new rules. It was all the impact statements. And by comparison, the Oregon Home, I mean, we're anticipating an Oregon Homes packet that is 10 pages long in terms of all of the materials that kind of go into that rulemaking process. So the scope is a fraction of what the Oregon Homes rulemaking was. So hopefully that makes it a little bit easier to follow along with, more digestible, and allows you all to have more specific and direct and more effective conversations with DLCD as you're advising and submitting feedback on the rules. Roseanne, there is kind of something like that, and I can maybe, Ingrid, you could pull up or send along it'll be the October 2025 LCDC rulemaking initiation staff report and materials. So back in October 2025, the commission initiated the rulemaking. So it's kind of a vote of the commission to kind of set staff on the course of beginning this rulemaking process. So that'll include lots of information in terms of the overview of the bills, the kind of key topics, and then a little bit about like the rulemaking process in general. And then that, in conjunction with the link that Ingrid provided up above, includes all the materials that we have publicly available for planning out that rulemaking. Okay. Any other questions, comments? Team, did I forget anything important there? Okay. Okay. I'm seeing, let's see. Okay. There's some statutory language in the chat. Trying to read through it all. So let me sit with that one and digest, and maybe I can respond. Maybe a response in writing is a little bit better for that one. So, because I'm not going to be able to sit there and read it. Okay, so I'm going to move us on to. Okay, great. So I'm going to move us on to the next portion of our agenda, which is related to housing planning assistance grants. This is relevant to, I don't know, kind of seeing the names most, but not all of the folks in this room, but just for those who it is applicable to, a little bit of an update. So we are in the process of the grant agreements. If you're receiving, it's called a direct grant from DLCD to your local government, we're in the process of moving those through the agreement phase, or kind of the contractual phase. So our internal procurement team is cycling through those and getting the final grant agreements ready for signature and review by your designated signers within your local government. There are some of those have already made it through that process, and yet others are in the queue waiting. So I just wanted to provide an update that if you have a scope and budget that you and the housing division, your lead in the housing division, have kind of agreed on and agreed to move it into the next steps, those are in the pipeline. I think we've got something on the order of 30 or so in the pipeline for the review and grant agreement process. And so Jacob, I see your note in there. Those come on out of that queue in batches, in chunks. And it doesn't seem like a constant flow, but it seems like a lot all at once. And then it seems like the procurement team has to work on other things, and then they come back and it's another batch. So in terms of timeframes, gosh, I really I can't put a pin on it exactly, but I would say 1 to 3 weeks, potentially 1 to 2 weeks, to kind of get those moving and out the door. For local governments who are working with a consultant team or have DLC providing a consultant team to do that work, kind of on the same process, we've got those have to go through that procurement process. We've got the first run of the contracts moving through that process, and the contracts team is packaging those up and getting those prepared. And those will go to the consultant project leads for review and signature. And there may be, well, there are likely to be amendments to those contracts on a rolling basis. So we're kind of waited for a lot of those to come in, and the majority of those to come in, so we could do one big batch of those. And then those conversations and scoping exercises that are taking a little bit longer will come in more on a rolling basis, and we'll kind of work with the consultant teams to do any amendments that are necessary to get those additional scopes added to the contract. So those are also at this point moving along. But again, I appreciate I recognize, understand the time that it has taken to get to even this point, which is longer than Bynea in the past. And just wanted to mention that those projects are moving as best we can get them moving through the granting and contracting processes. So if you have any specific questions or concerns that your project is getting gummed up in the works, or is clogged for some reason, or you haven't heard an update for a while, or anything, feel free to reach out to your identified point of contact from the housing division. We can get you an answer. Of course, your regional rep can also help you find the answer to that. Okay. A few things here in the chat. Katie, no worries about joining late, but we did not address the OHCS releasing of the 2026 housing production dashboard and target yet. So you didn't miss anything. An update, I'm going to actually put that at the bottom. We've actually got we've got a spot for some miscellaneous items, and I'll kind of call that one out as we get to that agenda part. Any other questions on grants and contracts, those kind of things? Again, I recognize the time that it's taken.
Can I ask a quick
Yeah,
question,
David,
Ethan?
please.
Paul? I just been really impressed by the number of sort of new faces to me, at least at DLCD, around all of this. And I'm wondering, you mentioned like identified contacts. Is there, and I'm embarrassed if this exists and I just haven't found it. Is there like a clearinghouse of sort of like certain lead staff expertise? I'm sending a lot of questions to you, and I'm wondering if I could be a little bit more, you know, um, effective and
Mm.
efficient in directing certain kinds of questions to certain staff. Is there like a directory for that?
There is not one that we publish, but I am the point of contact for your project, so you're emailing the right person. And the folks who you have been in contact with are likely your assigned, who you are within their portfolio of projects. So if you're contacting, or if you get if you send an email to a person who is not the lead housing team member on your project, I'm sure that will be corrected, and they'll kindly say, hey, Cotton is your lead on this project, and you'll feel free to contact Cotton going forward. So yeah,
So at this
no
point,
change or anything.
not so much topical, more of a trying to keep the flow of communication through centralized individuals as opposed to sort of topical stuff.
That's right.
Okay.
Yeah.
If
And
I
so,
add
yeah,
to that,
please.
yeah, I would just say always your regional rep.
Mm.
Even if you reach out to one of us on your project, regional reps like to stay abreast of what's the progress that's happening, or any situation changes. And I think most regional reps would be fine if they're the first point of contact. But I like to have our regional reps at least copied on anything I get.
Yes, very good clarifying point. Okay. So moving into the next kind of final formal piece of our agenda, which is a little bit of an overview of what you're likely to see from the department in terms of guidance, resources, tools, explainers, kind of things related to the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis kind of rollout. So I want to back up just a little bit and mention, for folks who haven't been following along, or haven't yet heard, the Department of Land, or the Land Conservation Development Commission, adopted rules implementing the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis program December 4th of 2025. And those rules came effective January 1st, 2025 or 2026. And so the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis program and paradigm is here and present and is in effect at this point in time. And that comes with lots of new information and ways to conduct Goal 10 and Goal 14 planning. But admittedly, we probably have done not a spectacular job of communicating those changes to you all, the on the ground implementers of that program. And so that's kind of the focus of or one of the primary focuses of the department, the housing division, in the first few months of 2026, the first 6 months of 2026. And so that kind of resource guidance environment will look differently to some, but will be kind of, I'm finding it difficult to describe what we really have envisioned. I'll call it layers. So there will be different ways to kind of engage with some of that communication material that ranges from really entry level point, like what is ONA, what are the key tenants, how does it function, what's the intersection between that and the Goal 10 planning work, like from the very highest level. And one of the benefits of that level of information is that it begins to solidify some of again, those key tenets of what the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis program entails and how it functions, both from a state regulatory framework, but also as local governments are implementing that, kind of like, what does it mean? How does it function? Then there will be the kind of next layer, next level is a little bit more technical, talks a little bit about the ins and outs, the details of what each of those key components mean in a little bit more detail. Again, probably very short, probably for like a planner audience, or like a deeply involved community member audience, or like an advocates audience. And then even further than that is like the true guidance, interpretation, implementation information. So like the very, very technical, if you wanted to do a housing production strategy and you're determining your actions, like specifically what is expected of the local government. And so you can find the benefit in DLCD's kind of vision for that is that folks who are very new to the planning program or just want to understand what we're even talking about, use some of the same terms, they can find that information easily and they're not bombarded by the technical details. On the other side, folks who are in the work now and needing to know specifically how does this work, how do I conduct these things, what's required of me, can also find that information without getting bogged down by the highest level, overview that they might already know. And so hopefully that guidance structure will be helpful, not only as you're preparing your decision makers on what your goal 10 adventure is likely to look like, but also can help you navigate those specifics as you're in there as well. So I don't know, any questions there or things to add to that from the housing division staff? I guess I didn't talk about time frame. I guess from the highest level I did, but hoping to get those documents and we start from the most foundational pieces and do some of that very high level overview first, and then we go a little bit deeper in terms of the technical nature of those kind of that mid tier. That'll happen probably 4 to 6 weeks, and then we dive even deeper into the official guidance document, which we're planning for like an early summer release for those. I think is it April, May, team? Do we remember? Okay, thanks, Jen. I see your agreement there. April, May timeframe for the publishing of the full big guidance documents, guidebooks. I also wanted to mention one last thing here. As you, as local government implementers, or anybody else who's in the audience wants to convene a conversation or hold a conversation or hear a presentation, or has a specific portion of this program that's of interest of any of the groups that you're involved in, or your planning commission or your city council or anything like that, please feel free to let us know. And we are happy to come and give a few minutes of presentation, slide overview, or have more specific small group conversations. All of that is fair game, and I think we're happy to accept all of those invites and have all of those conversations with you in the manner that it's going to work best for you and the groups that you represent. So feel free to reach out with any of those requests, and we'll see if we can accommodate those and be in attendance. Okay. So if there's not any questions there. Oh, Jessica, you have a comment. Okay. Aha. Okay, good question, Jessica. So this is harkening back to House Bill 2258, the Oregon Homes Program. And the question is whether the intent of the pre-approved building plans for eligible lots is to override local regulations, or whether the plans still have to comply with local zoning regulations, but would fast track the building permit review. So there are things like, I think it's both. Definitely the fast track portion. There is some process information, process provisions in the bill that speak to not applying, certain levels of review to those applications and limits the kinds of review of the building permit that can take place of the local government. And there are, when it comes to, say, a design standard or even some siting standards, site plan standards, those are also things that would happen as part of the pre-approval process. So for instance, a pre-approved building plan at the state building code would address some of the, or would exempt the pre-approval from some of the local government's design standards that they might have on the books, for example, because the state has already approved the construction of the building and all of the articulations and where the windows are and those kind of things and the roof line and all of that kind of stuff. And then when it comes to the pre-approved site, the eligibility for the sites, there may also be some standards that are that kind of override the local regulations to say, hey, if the site has these particular parameters, I'm making things up. It has a street facing lot dimension that is a certain size, or it's a certain square footage or something like that. The city can't apply additional restrictions to say that a local government or a builder can't build a pre-approved plan on those lots. So I think I can answer your question, yes to both, but not in their entirety. Or not absolutely. And some of those specific standards won't be known until we get into the actual rulemaking process, as we're having those conversations and identifying, making that weight, that the balancing of feasibility and regulatory frameworks that's necessary in determining which path to go down on some of those standards. Okay. So we'll move into some miscellaneous items here. I'm looking for, Thea Croman is not on the meeting today, but I was going to raise a note about the permitted and produced survey. So this is an annual survey that local governments report to the department on which units have been permitted and which units have been produced, have received a certificate of occupancy in any given year. And typically that deadline for submitting that report is February 1st of every year. However, two years ago, the department received feedback from the League of Oregon Cities requesting that the permitted and produced survey and the survey that the Population Research Center at Portland State conducts, if those could be integrated and used, because they basically are used for the same kind of purposes or ask very similar kinds of information. And to accommodate that request and make reporting, one less survey to fill out for local government planners, we combined those, which necessitated the change of the reporting timeframe for the permitted produced to kind of match with the PSU survey. And so that takes place in the summer. So those deadlines are July 1st of any given year, and instead of February. So just wanted to kind of call that out, highlight that for folks. I know we've gotten a few emails about, hey, am I supposed to submit this? Like, where's the form that I submit this? And the answer is not quite yet. We'll let you know. We'll reach out to local governments when that time comes. Okay, and then the other thing I'm wondering, I'm looking at you, Celestina. Could you possibly answer Katie's question here while I think about the answer to other questions?
Sure, thanks, Ethan. So I will put a link in the chat right now, which may more immediately get you some answers, Katie. And that's actually going to be the DAS, the Department of Administrative Services report, which has already been released. So I'll sort of parse through the different agencies, and you're not wrong in asking about the OHCS dashboard, but let me explain a little bit about the different roles and responsibilities here. So the Department of Administrative Services actually has the responsibility of running the methodology for the Oregon Housing Needs Analysis and determining the housing production targets and needed housing allocations every year. And there's a statutory deadline that be done by December 31st of each year. So every year around the new year, DAS will be publishing those new numbers. And let's see, that link isn't quite looking the way I want it to. There it is. So that's this document here. Now, this document includes all of the allocations and targets, regardless of whether local governments are subject to the expanded Goal 10 housing planning obligations. Whereas currently, the Oregon Housing and Community Services production dashboard only shows the production numbers and the equity indicators for local governments who have these expanded Goal 10 obligations. But it can be seen as a little bit more user-friendly. You can select the local government and just see the information for that local government. And we'll also be bringing the permitted and produced data into those dashboards as well. But in terms of just if you're looking for what are the targets as of this year, the DAS report will have that. Now, when will OHCS's dashboards get updated? We have a number of different sources of information that go into those dashboards, which is making the updating cycling a little bit tricky. So at the moment, the plan, as best I understand it, of course, we'll have to defer to OHCS colleagues to make sure nothing has changed, but is that those dashboards will be updated later this month. And again, that's because we've got data sources that come even from federal data sets, census data that gets updated. We had some delays in those data sets last year. Then we've got to integrate the results of the permitted produced surveys and quite a bit to bring together. So let us know either in the chat or otherwise if that gets at the crux of your question or if it doesn't. Oh, and you've got your hand up. Please go ahead, Katie.
Yeah, thank you. That is really helpful. And makes sense. So the one follow-up question I had is just looking at this, there's the 1-year target. Is that what feeds into the 8 years that we would see in the production dashboard?
Exactly. Yeah.
Okay.
For the time being, I know there's a little bit of a jog there, but you're exactly right. So if you're in an 8-year location, which Springfield is, of course, you multiply that by 8. If you're in the metro area, you would multiply that by 6.
Okay, great. Thank you. That should be it for now.
Okay. Any follow-up questions on that topic while we're here?
Okay. There's a question in the chat, Zoe, regarding the contextualized housing need. What is the status of DLCD's information repository? Want to go for it, Celestine?
Sure. Yeah, great question, Soli. That is on a shorter term rollout in terms of Ethan's characterization of, well, we've got a lot of guidance coming, getting the website updated so that we have that data repository is one of the near term items. We are also at the agency simultaneously embarking on updated compliance with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which requires a whole website revamp. So we've again got a number of timelines we're trying to align with in terms of revising our web pages. And I'll just take the opportunity to say that part of that larger overhaul of the website will hopefully include some streamlining of the housing pages. I do know that there are a few different pages and that it may not always be super clear where to navigate to get information. So the status is in progress and hopefully coming soon. But if you've got any specific projects that you're working on and that is impacting your work in any way, definitely please reach out to us.
Yeah, specifically that last point, definitely. Of if you feel like information should be available to you, or you feel like it's missing, or there's an error in something, or it's confusing, conflicting information, please do let us know as it relates to the work that you're actually getting started and doing on the ground there. There are some things, like Celestina mentioned, that are just works in progress, but there are other things that are just technical fixes, quick little fixes that we can run on the website to make sure that the right link is functioning and it goes to the right place and all that kind of stuff. So those are always welcome. Okay, so we've reached the point in the agenda where we can kind of open it up to folks as they have any questions on any of the things that we've talked about here in this meeting already, or otherwise some things that we haven't touched on that are related to housing planning or housing policy or otherwise. Legislative session started today. I would hate to do a run through of some housing bills, but we can. Yeah, Jacob.
I just had a quick question about, oh wow, just left my brain. Oh goodness, I'll have to put my hand back down. It just
Okay.
left right as I was raising my hand. I'm sorry. I think it'll come back.
No worries. Yeah, Patrick.
Hey, thanks, Ethan. Where can we learn more on Building Code's master planning program that's part of the House Bill 2258?
That is a good question. I would assume they have something online, but they might not. It is a program that has been in existence. It's not a new program that they're starting up. However, it has not been used at this point, to my understanding, that has not been used for pre-approval of full dwellings at this point. I think they have a master plan program for like decks or something like that currently, maybe some other structures, but so just thank you, Celestina, for the link. Just a note that you may not find all the information that you're looking for on that link.
Yeah, thanks, Ethan. I'm familiar with the program from years of working
Okay.
in local government offices, overseeing building codes, whatnot, but I was not aware of this new connection. So I'll take a look. Thanks, Celestina, and then I'll follow up or keep tracking it accordingly. Thanks so much.
Great. Any other questions? Mari?
Ethan, I'm wondering if I can provide an update on the housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy
Great.
schedule update.
Yes, good idea.
Okay, and maybe Jacob, that gives you some time to noodle on your question that escaped you, which happens to me often, so all good. Great. So annually, the housing team updates the housing capacity analysis and housing production strategy schedule. This is found as an attachment to Division 8 rules, so the housing rules and Oregon administrative rules. And we usually update this for our commission to adopt on an annual basis in the first quarter, usually in the first meeting of the year. And so we are slated to be before the Commission at the end of this month, specifically on February 26th, with proposed amendments to that schedule that is currently available on the Housing Capacity and Production webpage within our DLCD website. And so we have updated. These updates are routine updates to ensure that we are keeping up with the latest and greatest in terms of HCA and HPS deadlines. We are also adding cities based on whether they've hit that 10,000 population threshold that requires them to do the expanded Goal 10 obligations of the HCA and HPS on a cyclical basis on a 6 or 8 year time frame. And then, of course, many of you, well, this might be a reminder, but we did do some smoothing of deadlines from 2027 and beyond last year that we're finally formally bringing forward to LCDC for adoption and reflection. Those jurisdictions that received 1 year, maybe delay, will finally get to see that change in the HCA and HPS schedule that we're bringing forward to LCDC in February. So really, it's just routine updates. Hopefully there are no surprises of changes beyond those kind of 3 areas that I just named, but I will, we have submitted, because this is a rulemaking, it's small, but it is a rulemaking. We did submit the proposed amendments with the Secretary of State, and they have been, released. I just put in the chat the Secretary of State filing that includes that draft schedule, attachment A. And then let me include the website, which I think was already copied earlier by Ingrid, but just to copy it here, there is an accordion specifically for this rulemaking on this rulemaking website. And I think last thing that I'd like to relay is that the staff report and attachment A, so with the Secretary of State filing, we opened a public comment period. And so as we are receiving feedback, if any, on the schedule, we will be modifying that schedule and working towards bringing that forward for publication with LCDC's formal publication date for their packet in February, aiming for Thursday, February 12th. So that is forthcoming. Keep an eye out for the accompanying staff report that kind of provides the details on the changes that are in that attachment A in that rulemaking filing. With that, I am happy to respond to any questions, any clarifications. And I see Jacob, you have your hand up. Maybe it's related to this or maybe it's separate. Let me know, but happy to be responsive as I can.
We can wait for other, it is related to HPSs and HCAs, but we can see if there's others who have more direct questions.
Just one point.
It was my original thought, so.
Okay, good. Just one thing on the schedule. These are, this is not inclusive of all cities or anything like that on this schedule. It's just those that have their expanded Goal 10 obligations under HB 2001, the ONA program. So cities 10,000 and above, 3 metro counties, and the jurisdictions within Tillamook County. So if you represent an entity that does not fall in that category, you won't find that city listed. Okay.
Right, that's very key clarification. Thanks, Ethan.
All right, Jacob, go for
it. Thank you, Marie. If the second you mentioned HPS, that's what triggered my thought. Of course, the moment we moved on. The question I had was, and it probably seems a little rudimentary, but I could benefit, and maybe others could too. When it comes to the contextualized housing need, I know that the contextualized housing need feeds into the housing capacity analysis in some crucial ways, but also is functionally an input into the housing production strategy. And so the sort of practical question I have is, as we're thinking about sort of adoption processes and the just sort of natural sequence of these things, is there perhaps there's an opportunity for you all at DLCD to give us a little bit of a sense for how I've seen some flow charts that make sense to me, but I'm just kind of wondering, is there a sequence that is preferred when it comes to adoption findings, that kind of thing? That would be helpful to hear.
Good question. Anybody want to take that one on in the housing division? Okay,
Sure.
Faustina, go for it.
Oh, Madi, did you want to jump in? I just saw you came off mute.
I can, but feel free to jump in there. Doesn't matter.
Okay, well, you come do the second pass with whatever I forget. So, you have some options, particularly around, if I'm hearing you correctly, and you really want, part of the question is really around work planning, adoptions, and things like that. As you noted, the contextualized housing need feeds both the housing capacity and the housing production strategy. So hopefully in any sequencing you've seen, we've put that first, right? What do we need here? And then let's figure out our next steps. The contextualized housing need can be submitted to the department for what we've called in the rules a segmented review of the housing production strategy. It's optional. So in that case, you can send that in, and as the name suggests, it's a sort of a segmented review, because in the previous paradigm, the housing production strategy would get submitted, and through this non-land use decision process, the department would be reviewing both the needs analysis and the housing production strategy. And similarly, on the housing capacity analysis side, where that was a land use decision, that would be submitted and go through the land use decision process. And there would never be an opportunity for the department to provide any feedback on the contextualized housing need. So you could choose to take that segmented approach, send the contextualized housing need into the department. We would do a segmented review under that housing production strategy rule review authority that the department has. And then local government could feel a little bit more grounded in taking those next steps. The housing capacity analysis remains, a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, still goes through the land use decision process. So that would be your next step. And the general guidance that we have is to sequence that also in advance of the housing production strategy, because what you find in terms of capacity would inform what actions and how to sort of mold and focus and where to put emphasis on the actions that a local government will take in their housing production strategy. And in many cases where there's a deficit of land need, those actions will actually be used to, be those land use efficiency measures to respond to the land need. So then after the housing capacity analysis work is completed and goes through as a post-acknowledgement plan amendment, then that comes back to the sort of DLCD's non-land use review of the housing production strategy. So that's the third marker. CHN can come segmented to the department. HCA goes through a pop-up process. HPS comes back department review. Does that help? Okay.
The only thing I would highlight is a link that I just included that speaks specifically to what Cecina just described, which is the rules within Division 8, where you can review the option to opt into the segmented adoption pathway for the CHN through the HPS. The typical adoption process for a CHN is through the HCA, but again, you have the option, a jurisdiction does have the option to opt into the segmented HPS review, and those rules are outlined in section 0080 of Division 8. So I've copied and pasted that in there for folks.
a couple of thumbs up and a head nod and a thanks from Jacobs. I think we've tackled that one. One thing, I mean, you asked if we had a recommended approach. And I don't think we have a recommended approach. Those are options, pathways for local governments to navigate within their circumstances and situations. Right. Any other questions? Things are coming up for folks. Zoe?
Like trying to figure out how to raise my hand. Yeah, I don't know this. Yeah, I'm just wrapping my head around the contextualized housing needs rules and familiarizing myself with them. But I think it's within the contextualized housing needs analysis. There's a reference to evaluating whether the UGB has expanded within the time period of 3 housing capacity analyses cycles. And I just was wondering if this is like a retroactive look back of 24 years for jurisdictions that are outside of Metro, or if this isn't applicable at this moment in time because where we are at with this all just beginning.
Yeah, I can answer that question, and others feel free to jump in if I miss something, but it is applicable now, and that's why we use the language of within the equivalent time frame of 3 housing capacity analyses. So it would be 24 years, or it would depend on whether it's a metro or non-metro jurisdiction.
Awesome. Thank you.
Can I ask a follow-up on that, Jenna? I think we encountered the term equivalent in some of the contextualized housing need language related to housing capacity analysis cycles. But then in the buildable lands inventory language, is that a same thing, same applicable, the equivalent, or is there another interpretation around? I'm not going to be able to pull that reference up off the top of my head, but I know there was a little bit of curiosity around noting equivalent in one rule and noting the absence of equivalent in another, and just wondering if that in the actual application of the buildable lands inventory, looking at lands that had not developed over certain cycles, how we should be interpreting that, just to be clear.
Yeah, and I see Cuttin came off or came on too, so feel free to jump in, Cuttin. But yeah, so in rule, this is in Division 8, Rule 100, the housing capacity analysis. And in that rule, there are a number of safe harbors, including a safe harbor to progressively discount the estimated residential capacity by 1/3 for each housing capacity analysis cycle. And so that is each cycle from here on forward. It is not the equivalent of 1 or 2 housing capacity analysis cycles like it is in the CHN rules.
Yeah, I would just add that that paragraph 9 of Rule 100 is forward-looking. The CHN rule does do a look back. So retroactively equivalent of a year cycle looking back, while Rule 100 is not retroactive. It only looks forward from here, from this date forward. So I guess there is a difference. Your question was, is there a difference? Yes. We were just figuring out how to articulate that difference.
Yeah, and I think we're touching on a point that is maybe we could kind of pause here for a little bit and talk about this change, because this is a big change from how buildable lands inventories and capacity assessments have been conducted in the past. So under the old paradigm, old rules, old process, buildable lands inventories were an assessment of, actual capacity in terms of what is built now and what is likely to be built in the future, or the capacity, what could be built on those lots. And this introduces an opportunity for local governments to not preclude those lands from inclusion or count in the buildable lands inventory. They're still inventoried, and a capacity is assigned to that buildable land, but there's a discounting that kind of happens and progresses throughout time if those lands that are that have been counted on for capacity are not seeing the development, and they're therefore less and less likely to be developed. The local government can discount that capacity for the purposes of determining whether or not they have a surplus or deficit of capacity within an urban growth boundary. So just wanted to kind of pause there for a little bit and note that that is one of the areas of departure from previous rule paradigm to the current. Okay. What else is coming up for folks? Anything? Questions on rulemaking, questions on program, grants, bills, interpretations. Okay. Well, won't belabor the point, but do want to wish you all a happy first day of 2026 legislative session. I think there are just some stats. There are, I think currently, I don't know, I haven't checked this morning, but something on the order of 260 bills that were filed, pre-session filed. And the session is a 35-day sprint starting today, ending, I believe, March 8th or something like that, 6th. And I know that the DLCD housing, it's a much less like housing focused session. I would describe it as, in terms of the number of bills that DLCD is tracking, DLCD housing division is tracking. I think we're at present 10 or 11 bills that we're kind of tracking and following along with. So just in terms of the percentage of the total, that's a little lower than previous sessions. So just for some broader awareness of the folks in the room on what's happening at the state capitol. But once session is over, the department will provide a summary of bills that impact land use and the statewide planning program, as we typically do. And you can look forward to future versions of this meeting, dedicating some time to talking a little bit about some of those bills that did pass and the policy implications and the fiscal implications and the rulemaking implications of those bills, should they have those impacts. So. If there's not anything else, I would propose that I would move to close the meeting. And we don't need a second or anything like that, but I'm happy to hang out if other folks have questions, but otherwise, thank you for joining us today and all your good questions and all your good work moving through this process. So thank you.
6 more weeks of winter.
Yes, thank you.
Yes, David.
Hey, Ethan, could we
Yeah.
do a call for maybe 10 minutes?
Sure,
okay with
absolutely.
that?
Yeah. Yep.
Okay.
Okay. Talk
Thanks.
soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye.